When I was a children's pastor, there was a lady who was a talker. She could talk, she could bicker, she could talk. She could talk. She could talk your ears off. People would see her coming down the hallway and ditch into the sanctuary to avoid getting caught in a conversation with her. Well, a new youth pastor showed up. She had 3 kids in the youth group, and he was warned, don't listen to her. Keep her at arm's length. Well, there's something she did to open his heart and change the situation. I had a friend once who worked in sales, and he was one of a 4-member team. His district manager came to him and said, "You've got to increase sales 25%. The only problem is that his 3 teammates were rules-oriented, not open to ideas. We're just going to keep doing the things the way we've always done them before. And he was panicked about how he could increase sales with those 3 rule keepers on his team. There was something he did that totally changed the situation. You and I are going to find ourselves in situations all the time where we need to turn a sympathetic ear toward us, where we need to have an opportunity to be heard, where we need a second chance. And so today, I want to share with you a principle about humility and service. All month long and on Sundays, we're talking about the virtue of humility. And humility and service are closely tied together. And so I want to look at the other side of Jesus' humility and service, because I think it really shows us a way that we can open a back door with somebody where the front door has been closed. This is a spiritual truth, by the way, that is lost on our culture. And it's lost on our culture because when you don't get what you want, when you're not being heard, you're told, speak up. Go to the manager, go to the principal. You rattle those cages, you complain, you make your voice and your concerns heard. The problem is that kind of frontal assault can often result in the front door being shut in our face. So what do you do? What do you do when you need to open the door to someone's heart? Well, I'm going to suggest something very practical. You serve. It is still true today, 2,000 years after Jesus gave us the clearest picture of it, that if you've got a closed front door with somebody, you can often open the back door with them by serving your way into their heart. This is true with parents, with adult children, with coaches, directors, bosses, friends, neighbors, teachers, pastors. You can often open the back door and serve your way into someone's heart, even when they've closed the front door to you. I want to look at a woman whose life is encapsulated in the book of Acts and who really shows us how this works. And it's found in Acts chapter 9, beginning in verse 36. And we're going to go through this passage verse by verse. There was a believer in Joppa named Tabitha, which in Greek means Dorcas. She was always doing kind things for others and helping the poor. Dorcas. It literally means like a gazelle. If you've ever seen National Geographic footage of a gazelle making its way across the landscape, it's graceful. And Dorcas had this wonderfully graceful way that she served. And she just served and served and served with tremendous acts of charity. Luke uses a word that's only used once in the entire New Testament to describe her. It's the word that we have, there was a believer. The Greek word is actually mathetria, which is female disciple. Only time it's used in the New Testament. I think it's Luke's way of saying, hey, this Dorcas, one of a kind, baby. They made her and broke the mold, like her acts of charity, her service is just so huge. She stands out. I think it's Luke's way of kind of giving a shout out to the life that Dorcas lived. Well, moving on in verse 37, about this time, Dorcas became ill and died. Her body was washed for burial and laid in an upstairs room. So her body had been prepared for the spices and all the things that would take place, but they hadn't gotten to that part yet. They were hoping that maybe, just maybe, she would surprise them and gasp for air and kind of come back. Verse 38, the believers had heard that Peter was nearby at Lydda, so they sent 2 men to beg him, please come as soon as possible. They send 2 men to Lydda, which is about 10 miles inland from Joppa. And it's about a 3 or 4 hour trip each way. Come without delay. They're hoping that maybe Dorcas could be spared. And so that's verse 39 and following. So Peter returned with them, and as soon as he arrived, they took him to the upstairs room. The room was filled with widows who were weeping and showing him the coats and other clothes that Dorcas had made for them. But Peter asked them all to leave the room. He knelt and prayed. Turning to the body, he said, "Get up, Tabitha." And she opened her eyes. And when she saw Peter, she sat up. There's weeping, and the room is filled with widows who had brought the cloaks and clothing that Dorcas had made for them. Now, when someone's resuscitated in the scriptures, they're presented to their family. This is true of Elijah when he heals the young boy from Zarephath, and it's true of Jesus with the man in Nain. And so when God raises up Dorcas through Peter, Peter presents Dorcas to these widows who were just beside themselves at losing Dorcas. Peter gave Dorcas his hand and helped her up, and then he called in the widows and all the believers, and he presented her to them alive. The news spread through the whole town, and many believed in the Lord. And Peter stayed a long time in Joppa, living with Simon, a tanner of hides. Why? Why would service like the kind that we see in the life of Dorcas work? Look no further than the life of Jesus. When Jesus arrived on the scene, Jesus was God incarnate, God enfleshed, and Jesus could have demanded loyalty and repentance and obedience and service, and he would have been right to do so. But we're told that the Son of Man didn't come to be served, but to, but to serve. God won us over, not by demanding that we love him from some fiery mountaintop, but by loving us and serving us first. Let me ask a question. God forbid, if you were to die tomorrow, would your good works, would your acts of charity and service to others prompt people to rise up and weep like the church and the city of Joppa did at the death of Dorcas? Still not sure you believe me? Remember that lady I mentioned at the beginning who was a talker? Talk. You know what she did? She made snacks for the youth every single Sunday, and she got other parents to help. She took the jobs that no one else wanted, and that youth pastor listened to her because she served her way into his heart. Remember the friend that needed to increase sales that I mentioned at the beginning of this teaching? Had to increase sales by 25%. You know what he did to those 3 teammates? He brought in food. When it came to events, he did all the hard work of moving stuff around. When it came time to the bookkeeping into things, because they were all rules people, he did all the homework and had it all done ahead of time, right? He served his way into their hearts. What if you don't feel like it? I'm just going to tell you straight up, man, don't wait until you feel humility and feel service in your heart. Serve first. And I get it. Some of you are like, yeah, Max, I hear you, but I shouldn't have to serve that jerk of a boss, that jerk of a spouse, that jerk of a parent. Like, I get it. I get it. But let's look again at Jesus the night he was betrayed. He washed how many disciples' feet? How many of them? How many disciples were there? 12. And was Judas one of those? Yeah, he washed the feet of Judas. Come on, you're in the room with the guy who's going to betray you, another guy who's going to even deny knowing you, and the rest of them are just going to cut and run on you. And you serve them anyway. What would it look like in your marriage if you looked for ways to serve your spouse? What if that it's really rubbing you the wrong way, or that work thing or that school thing? What if you simply began to serve your way into their heart? Is it possible that you could open up the back door and open up the relationship in a way that it wasn't before? I just want to remind you that God knows how we're wired. God knows what it is to be human. He made us and he became one of us. And when Jesus showed up on the scene, he literally lived out true humility, and he served his way into our hearts. And so if you've got some closed doors in your life, I just want to remind you that a very practical way, a very practical application of the virtue of humility is simply this. It's often possible when the front door of the relationship is closed to you that you can often gain entrance through the back door by simply serving your way into their hearts. Gang, I believe in you, and I cannot wait until we gather again.